Hey, I'm Alicia, your non-monogamous relationship coach. Welcome to the podcast where my friends and I chat about our relationships, enthusiastic non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, kink, and our lives. You'll get a candid peek into what makes it worth it to live life outside the box. And in case you're still wondering, nope, we're not monogamous. Hey. Okay, let's be real. Navigating ethical non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, enthusiastic non-monogamy. It can be thrilling and confusing, and sometimes it's downright messy. But today I've got a really amazing couple here, Sasha and Moritz. They're on deck to share a bit about how they built a really strong E&M connection. These two have been coaching couples combined for over 20 years, helping people create passionate and fulfilling relationships that defy the norm, go beyond what is standard. And their own journey is anything but traditional, and they're living proof that E&M can be a recipe for incredible intimacy and incredible growth. So here's a couple of things you can expect in today's episode: some communication hacks, some ways to navigate jealousy and other tough emotions in a way that strengthens your connection, how to leverage your intimacy for personal growth and transformation, some boundaries that feel really liberating, showing up as your most authentic self, and a bunch more. So whether you're like just starting your E&M journey or you're a curious veteran, these two have got a lot of great information to share. They're living proof that open communication, personal freedom, and a commitment to growth can create a really extraordinary relationship dynamic. So grab your headphones, settle in, get ready to be inspired. I know that you're going to walk away with some tips you can use, and I'm excited for you to hear it. P.S. If you're loving the show, leave us a 5-star review and tell us your biggest non-monogamy takeaway. Your review helps keep these conversations going. Enjoy. There we go. Cool. Awesome. So I'm really excited that you guys are here and that we're recording a podcast together.
Likewise.
We are too. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. Let's start by, I would love it if you would just introduce yourselves really quick for the listeners, and let them know who you are.
Why don't you start?
We are Sasha and Moritz. We are a married couple. We've been married for 6 years, and we teach classes on relationship and intimacy. And we're very non-dogmatic. So we don't believe that there's one kind of relationship style that's the right style. We really support couples in understanding communication, their own communication, and defining really clearly what they want to have in their relationships, what they want to receive from their partners that maybe they aren't receiving or they don't know how to ask for, and support them to create a vision with their partner to make their relationship the best it can possibly be.
Authentically
and in alignment with their own personal values of who they are and what's important to them in the world. And we've been working together for almost the entire time we've been married. So very early on in our relationship, Moritz is like noticing that we both do really similar work. And he's like, how could we not do this together? And really gave me the kick in the ass to say, yes, let's definitely work together. And let's bring our purpose and passion into the world as a couple. So that's been really brilliant and amazing, and just not something that I felt like I was ready to dive into. And he was like, of course, we can't even avoid this. It's so amazing. And I'm so grateful that he was able to name that so early on.
I love that so much. That's amazing. Do you want to add anything, Moritz?
Yeah, I would say, like, I think the main thing that I would say has us stand out, or has our work be like unique in the big pool of like relationship coaching, is that Sasha and I really want to find out who is the individual and how do they need the relationship to be. Like, there is, like, I often have like a big allergy to any kind of rules and to having a spiritual facade and all of those kind of things. Like, I really like to keep it down to earth and keep it real. I'm usually someone, if we are in a coaching session with someone or we teach a class, and I notice very quickly where people try to perform or do it a certain way because they've learned it somewhere. And I'm usually the first one to ask, like, but is that really who you are? And is that really actually what you want in that situation? And I love to advocate for, especially for men. I think especially right now in this time, there's like so much like this whole like strain of like emasculation that's happening, that's like coming to the surface, where I think there's just so much gender war in relationships. And yeah, like when I work with men, because Sasha works with the women, I work with the men, and then we work together with the couple. um, I really like to draw men out in a way of like, what is actually, how do you actually want to be in the relationship? Because I think one of the biggest issues that we see is a commitment issue, like men not being able to fully meet their partner because they think that they have to meet them in a particular way, that
Mm.
is like scripted by society towards them, and then it's like running a tape. But it's more like, what I'm trying to like point towards with men is like, how do you want to show up? Because when you do it from a place of passion, from a place of like, I love this, then no one needs to push you to be committed, but you want to be committed because it's the thing that you really love doing. And I would say, like, Sasha and I like look at this not just from a relationship point of view, but from the relationship, from the individual, and then outward. Like, we currently, like, we have started with our relationship and really tried to figure out who we are, what we want as a couple, and our desires were very very far apart in the beginning. And now we've done this work to now have this piece of land that we bought completely raw, and we're developing it together, and we're putting our vision into it, and our work is aligned with our vision. And that's really the larger arc of what we do with couples, is like help them really get committed into their lives and into their what they're passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 that's beautiful. I love that. I love what you said about working with men, especially today, and what is happening for men. And I'm curious, could you say a little bit more about that? Because like you're talking about, the podcast is Nope, We're Not Monogamous, which a lot of people would think means not committed, right?
Right.
And so I'm really curious when you talk about that, that commitment, how those two things align or intersect.
Mm.
Well, I think for me, the main reason why we are not monogamous is because we both love community. Like, one of the reasons why we have this piece of land is because we want to develop it to be a place of community where guests can come, but also where multiple families live here together with us. And we both really just love going and diving deeper with other people, like whether that be a friend, or like, both of us really love to have good friendships that have depth to them. And same, like, there's a way that when you actually, like, let's say you have a play partner, like, there's a whole different depth that you can reach with that person, especially in a sexual context, where like you can, I would say, like, you can dive into realms where it becomes more like shamanistic, like deep soul kind of work together, because that's what that play space allows for. And I that's what's interesting to me in that non-monogamous realm. But then I consider this here, like, I am married to this woman. I am committed to this woman. There's nothing that's going to take us out. I sometimes hear people, when they consider polyamory or something, be like, well, but um, I fear that you might find someone and you fall in love and run away. And then I often hear the counter answer to this, and it's like, well, yeah, that might happen. And I think that's problematic. That's a problematic answer, because for us, it's like, no, that might not happen. Like, here's a commitment. We have a family. We have a larger game that we playing, that we committed to, which then gives us actually the permission to be like, I go home and I was like, I was on a date and I'm like, wow, I totally fell in love with that person in that moment, you know? And we actually get to share that, because we don't have that insecurity of like, well, maybe I fall in love and then I walk away from this because I found something better. There is no like, I found something better. The best thing that I can have is a commitment to something,
Mm.
because otherwise I'll always run the risk of running with the goodies. But I know as a practitioner that like I have the depth to know it's not the goodies what I'm in for. It's the struggles that I'm in for. Because if I work through those struggles, I get out at a whole different level.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's amazing. Very much. There's something, we have like this culture that says like if you love somebody, like if you fall in love with somebody, whether it's for an hour or a day or a year, that you have to now go and make a bunch of life changes. Like if what if you fall in love with somebody and then you run away? Well, what if I fall in love with somebody and I don't change anything about my life at all? Like, what if that's just an
Right.
experience I'm having? It's an emotional state I get to have.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in our relationship, and one of our personal values that we both share is like bringing what we get in our connections with other people, whether it's like, oh, I fell in love for an hour, or like felt the experience of love in my body and got to notice what that felt like. And um or I learned something about myself, or I saw something, he would say I saw something in her that like had me notice this other part of me that like I didn't have access to yesterday. And then he's bringing, what our language word is, like bringing the energy back into this relationship that we have, and sharing with each other, not just like, oh, there was a moment when this thing happened, although that's part of our sharing, but also sharing like what depth he went to in himself with another partner, and that allows us to have greater depth because we're bringing back what we get outside of the relationship as something to be shared, as a resource essentially to be shared between the two of us. And that can look a lot of ways, and I think that is really hard to understand, like you said it before we were recording, about like if you've never experienced it, if you've never done that before, it's hard to even grok, well, what would it feel like to like, well, so I tell him about this thing and then we're jealous and then we're angry, and like, yeah, and then you get to know each other inside of jealousy, then you get to know each other inside of, like, that's intimacy, right? When we let the parts of ourselves that we would usually hide or withhold in order to control the situation or think that we can control another person, which, just because we have deep commitment with each other and we are married, doesn't mean that we consent to the illusion of I'm going to control you and who you are and what you do and what you think, right? And I think culturally that is very much the norm, is that people choose monogamy because they think it comes with, well, then I never have to feel jealous, or then I never have to feel alone, or then I never have to feel like my partner isn't telling me everything. And I'm like, monogamy doesn't give me any of those things,
Nope.
like I have what I want with my partner because I express that I want it. And that's
Yeah.
my sovereignty, and my autonomy as a woman is like telling him what I want and taking responsibility for being in the negotiation of it and being in the feelings of it, and seeing the jealousy or the pain or the anger, like negative emotions, as just as exalted as joy and ecstasy and pleasure and like the good stuff, right? That like I want to know him in all locations and I want him to see me in all locations. I don't want to leave anything out because I believe all of it, we believe all of it is sacred and all of it is valuable to the growth of who we both are and who we want to be and what we want to create in the world.
Yeah. 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 Beautiful. How have you navigated jealousy or insecurity in your relationship?
I would say that, so my understanding these days of, so like, let's say Sasha goes on a date. I had an experience once. Sasha goes on a date, everything was kind of like clear. Like I knew what they're gonna do, how the flow of the day is gonna go, and I was with our kid at the same time. And then there was a moment where like I thought they're gonna come back and meet me at the playground, and I saw the car of theirs go by, and then to me it felt like it took like an hour longer from that point. And I was like all of a sudden at the playground, and I was like, I don't know what's happening, and like why are they taking so long now, why are they sitting in the car, like all of that. And that was like a more recent event where I felt some form of like jealousy or fear. I think jealousy is a form of fear. and
Yeah.
and because I don't get jealous if she's like, I'm gonna have a date with this guy, and like this is what we're gonna do, even if it's like a like sex or whatever, and I'm like, cool, go have fun. But at that moment I was like, I felt that like insecurity sting, like, and I haven't felt that for a while. But um and to me what it is like there's something happening that takes me out of control, out of the known. Like
Mm.
we have usually so much like agreements, and like we share about what we're going to do and what we desire and what we want, even with the other person, that it's very transparent. And sometimes you hit those moments when a date or something takes a next step without that being agreed upon with each
Mhm.
other. And that, I think, causes these like stings, these like moments of jealousy. At least it does for me, where I'm like, I don't know what's happening, and it's like an internal like unsettlement.
Yeah.
And I can, with her, because I trust her so much, I can be inside that sting and be like, all right, let me feel this. Like again, like I'm a practitioner, like um I I like to sit with my feelings, and I know there's nothing gonna be like life changing. Like I just get to experience that. So I think that's how we are with them. But at the same time, we also always try to work that like the entire experience actually feels pleasurable to both people and safe to both people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we have a really good practice of caring for each other, and both really having a willingness and a curiosity to like hear the jealousy and do our best to express the jealousy. What I was thinking about for me is like I try to express it without blame. Like I don't want
Yeah.
him to take on what I'm feeling or naming or like what's arising for me as though he's done something wrong, because I think there's a lot of stuff in our shadow about like, oh, I can't want something else. And that like even though we've both been practicing in open relationship, and ethical non-monogamy is the term that I like the best. I don't know if any of them really describe how I actually feel, but that's the one that I think I fall the closest into. um we've been practicing for a long time, like before we were together, and with other partners, both of us with other partners before we were with each other. So there's a lot of practice under our belt, and a lot of knowing that you go in, you have an experience, a feeling arises, you come back, you share the feeling, you can recover from those places. And I think if you're brand new in this world of trying it out, or like wanting to experience what it feels like to connect with someone else who's not your partner, the jealousy stuff is very intense, and it can knock us out. Still, like, we're seasoned practitioners and it still can knock us out. But I really work on having consciousness around not bringing shame or blame into the equation, so that I'm really taking responsibility for what I felt as my own feeling. Not saying like you did something and you made me feel, like, to me that's a lack of vulnerability, and I really want to bring
Mhm.
my vulnerability. Like if I felt jealous, I want him to I want to express that in a way where I'm open and I'm soft in my expression, so that he can be connected to me in it, because that's really what I want. In the place where the jealousy arises is like I have a fear that he doesn't care that there was pain, or and I think vice versa. I don't want to speak for you, but I think like there's always this fear of like my feelings didn't have an impact for you and you weren't thinking of me. And that's the fear, not the reality. But that like I have learned that the more vulnerably I can share and the more open I can be when I'm allowing him to be connected to the experience I had, the better I feel afterwards, the further alchemy that happens in our relationship. And that creates growth. And I'm like, that's worth the price of admission, right?
Mhm.
Like, not even the experience I had with someone else, which is lovely and great and like hot. And I could talk about that all day. I think it's more easy to access why that part would be good, but the feelings that arise and the experience of repairing and coming back together, repairing if there's a difficulty or a misstep in the agreement, like that creates just as much if not more as the like sexy like going deep with another person that I'm not married to is like really hot and fun. And oftentimes for me, when I'm in those experiences that we see as like the high part of it, you know, I'm like, oh, I often, even though I don't want to compare people, I often find myself like, oh, I miss this part of this person I know so well, or I miss this experience that like it's so easy for me to access safety and letting go here. And navigating, accessing safety and letting go with someone else teaches me things about myself that I wouldn't get if it was always just easy to drop in and be safe and let go with the person I know I trust. That's like, okay, this is, you know, with my eyes closed, easy to feel the block in myself and work together, dismantle it, and become more open in a sexual experience or a sensual moment, you know? And when I'm doing that with someone else, I might access a lock in myself that I didn't know was there, that I probably presented to him a lot and he might know is there, but I might not have as much consciousness with it until I'm in that experience with someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. I love the idea. I love that you guys keep saying practitioner, right? Because like not only in your work, but also in your relationship, right? And because it's all a practice. And that jealousy is something that I've had to like, it was a huge thing for me. And I had to spend a long time working through it. And now when I feel it, I'm like, oh, oh, that's right. That's what that feels like. This is not a good feeling, right? But now I can look at it and be like, oh, I'm having this not good feeling that I can go and share with my partner and talk to them, and this will pass and it will be fine. Uh, I'm not going to
Totally.
die. It's okay.
Right? Right.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
really believe, as being a practitioner in other arenas, you know, having a meditation practice, having, you know, doing physical things with my body, yoga and like movement practices over my lifetime, and lots of other kinds of places where I accessed knowing myself in a lot of locations inside of practice. I really learned that piece around just seeing how I show up when one of those things is challenging or triggering, or like that gives me a whole new layer of knowing myself that I wouldn't get if I just like only did my practice when it was easy and it looked good, you know?
Definitely. Excuse me. Um, uh, oh, there was something else you said that I wanted. It'll come back to me, I'm sure. You guys have, it sounds like you have like a really solid level of communication. Um, what are some like communication strategies that have worked well for you guys in building safety and security in your relationship?
Yeah, I actually, I wanted to say something on that anyway. I think really the main thing, like Sasha said, like, oh, and then like fears come up and they're not the reality. And I do, in our work, I do see people where their fears become reality. And it's
Mhm.
because there is not the full level of care, and people trick each other into like turning their fears into a reality. You know, it's like, oh, he doesn't care, and then eventually it leads to a breakup, and then it's the confirmation, right? Like that person doesn't care, and the guy is at the same time like, oh, like I tried so many times, I cared so many times, but it wasn't rewarded, and like now I don't care anymore, right? Like, and those things do turn into realities for people, unfortunately. um
Yeah.
and you know, like we can push it to that edge sometimes in our relationship too, and it can like get intense and critical. And like the good thing is like both Sasha and I have things outside of the relationship that help us to come back to clarity, and I think that's really, really important. And I mean, we used to like have teachers or coaches ourselves, and now we like just have practices, and we have our own insights that we know how to access. And
Yeah.
and then in our current workshops, for example, we teach two things. One is the truth carrot, um, which is basically like it's a tool how to not get caught in all of the distractions that we throw at each other, right? Like sometimes like the blame game and the complaining and the like, well, you haven't done this or that. That can be all we'll call those the carrot greens, right? But we want to get to the root of it. And we'll basically in that workshop we teach how do we actually get to the root of the issue. And often the root of the issue, especially if you are as a man, like if you are working with a woman has a lot of different things going on, but the root is often concealed and often has not is not very apparent what it really is about. And you, as a man, you have to access something, a deeper knowing that a lot of men are not trained to, and I think also evolutionary um, are not raised to be, because this is something that I thought recently, like why there's much conflict between men and women, I think is because women speak a more emotional, uh, like attuned language that they had to develop in order to raise a baby, because the baby doesn't talk in logic terms, the baby emotes what it needs, so the mother has to learn this. And every woman, I think, has an embodied sense of this. But this is often what goes wrong in relationships, because the woman wants to be understood on that level that she's trained at, like that she's basically evolved into this emotion, like emoting kind of like communication. And when she starts to talk about a problem in a logical sense, it doesn't make any sense to the man. So and then the man is really more the rational guy who's like later on takes the children and then shows them how to do their jobs and all of that kind of stuff in the world. Like the man is the one who takes them eventually and teaches them the more rational language, but then there is a problem between the two. And we these days we've like developed a bunch of like tools that help us to come together into that communication that's nonverbal, that understanding of what is really going on. And for sometimes now, like we both are very fluent in this. Like sometimes we talk together with a woman and we both like, she's talking about a problem and we're like, yeah, she has desire about this. And it's like totally not related, but we can feel it, you know? And vice versa. Also, Sasha is now really incredible at like knowing when it is about a logical, like hands-on approach, like especially like when we do work here on the land or we create workshops, there's a whole like structural element where it's good if you connect it to your senses. It's gonna be even better. You're gonna create really amazing structures if you connect it to your senses, but you know how to translate them and then put them into like a structural A to B kind of plan. And I think both of those skills are really important in relationship when you want the relationship to really work. And in order to get there, this is another one we like to give it silly names, is the talking couch. That is
The
another tool
talking
that we teach in
couch.
our the talking couch. Yes,
Okay.
Like sitting together and talking. It's very basic, but it's very powerful.
it's and it came about because we basically like we were in a place where we had constantly conflicts, and we just couldn't hear each other and we couldn't penetrate it, and eventually we were like, and then often we were talking about it out of order, like we were supposed to like go somewhere, meet people, and all of a sudden we would like get into an argument. And so eventually it would be like, this is the couch. This is where we talk about this stuff, and nowhere else. Okay, this is the only place where we're going to do this. And then we would sit there for hours sometimes and just actually like really dive deep and be like,
and really listen to each other.
Really listen to each other. Someone would say something, and then the other person would be like, this is what I'm understanding you saying. Not just reflective listening, but like, this is what I'm understanding at the core. Is that everything? And like really draw it out and have a place where we can sync up the language differences, and where we can really then from the language also get to a place of understanding each other's nervous system, how the nervous system of the other person works at depth. So now, when you do that, eventually you have a constant intuitive connection where I know exactly how Sasha feels in every given moment. There's no communication needed because we have done the groundwork to have almost like, I would say, create like a mycelial network of connections between our nervous systems that we know at any given point what's going on. She can even drive away with the car, be in the supermarket, and if she's like has an issue there is a high chance that over here, without a text message, I'll feel that something is up.
Amazing. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. My husband and I, it was the bathtub. That's we would sit in the bathtub for hours and have these conversations and just keep unpeeling the layers of the onion until we got to the core and actually understood what was happening for each other. Like, okay, now we're all wrinkly
Yeah.
and we're at the
So
center.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love the carrot
I wanna just
also.
add one more. I want to just add one more, which is in the essence of what Moritz said, but I wanted to say directly that we are very committed to a practice of relentless truth telling. And
Yeah.
I think this is a really interesting one, especially for people who like, oh, we've been married 10 years, we've been married 17 years, we totally tell each other everything. And there's often a lot that's unsaid. And
So
it's
much.
not consciously, and it's not in a spiteful manner, you know, it's not people like knowingly holding back, but we do have a lot of conditioning patterns where like we withhold in order to control. I think for women, it's a lot about the illusion of control. And also like tell a half truth or tell what we think our partner wants to hear instead of what's really happening for us. And that patterning, if you don't look at it and you don't address it, is very, the word that's coming to mind is expensive in the relationship, because ultimately you have left unsaid a lot of what you want, a lot of what you need, a lot of what you're feeling, and that has a really big impact on how you both feel about the relationship. And it's not only women that withhold. I think there's a form of this that men do as well. And so like we are very like, one of our, I would say like our simplest communication tool is like telling each other the truth, even if we think it might hurt feelings, even if it's not what our partner wants to hear, even if, you know, I think we have a culture of like taking, this is especially for women, but I think any people of any gender do this one. If we think something is going to make our partner angry, sad, or you know, any negative emotion, basically, we either don't tell it, we sugarcoat it, we withhold it, we change it around, we try to fix it before they know, because we don't want to have to feel their emotional response. And I think for, I'll just speak for the women, that like I, for a long time, and I'm still working on this, would feel like if he's angry, I need to take responsibility for what he's angry about, even if I didn't do it. And so then it would have me not tell him things that might make him angry, because I was like, if he's angry, I'm responsible for that anger. And that comes from, you know, family patterning and dysfunctional things that were put into me unconsciously by my lineage, right? Which isn't the responsibility of one person. It's really passed down. And just to honor that, like, you come into relationship with a lot of conditioning that you don't even know you have. And people are like, okay, you want to get married? Okay, you want to live in a 2-bedroom house and have 3 kids and a dog? And like, what color will our fence be? And like, maybe like what city we want to live in, but like really having the conversation about what is what has come in with you is very difficult to do. And
then everything's
we
falling
did
apart if they don't do that.
right, and we did
Yeah.
our best to bring some of that to light and have some consciousness. We in our wedding we did shadow vows, so we did like our regular vows where we like said the things we do want to do, and we also named all the patterns that we're bringing in from our family lineage and from our personal experiences. And we did this in front of our friends and family because that's who we are and that's what we wanted to do. um, and it was really powerful to acknowledge it and to put it out on the table. And I think we really live our relationship that way, and we hold the truth as like a very sacred offering that we can bring to each other, that is not like, oh, let me just give you this thing that I like don't really want to tell you and like feel really responsible. Like, look at the places in myself where I'm not responsible for fixing his anger. His anger doesn't need to be fixed. I'm now like at a place where I'm so grateful that he's willing to allow me to feel and to see him in his full expression of his anger. You know, I think there's a lot of different words for this, but like we just use
And
the
it's
word
not
anger.
we're not talking about abusive kind
No,
of anger.
no.
Right.
We're not talking about really unconscious, unresponsible, but I do think there's a place where we pick up as women a lot that doesn't belong to us. And
Yeah.
that's very exhausting. And so women are like, it's too hard. I can't do it. I don't want to have this conversation. I won't bring it to him. I just go to my girlfriends. It stays with my therapist and I don't talk to my partner. And like, long term, that builds resentment, and that builds a fear of like, he can't handle me or he doesn't want to handle me, right? And it has me not bring my full emotion to him. He trusts me enough to express fully with me, and I can know in most of my moments, right? There are of course moments where I fall out of this, but know that I'm not responsible for changing him or fixing him, but that I can be present with what's happening for him. And that's a gift to him and it's a gift to me, for that to be welcome, to be expressed without, he's not, he to the best of his ability, he's expressing it without making it my responsibility, right? And that's a place that we've worked on, and we've like really um done some fine work. I'm thinking of like detonating a bomb, like fine work with high level, high intensity emotion
Mhm.
to allow that to be expressed in a healthy way. And also to take responsibility for like taking care of ourselves on the other side of that. Like he also takes care of himself and I also take care of myself. And that's an important ingredient. But just
That.
wanted to name that, like telling the truth in your relationship, if you bottle it up for 10 years, of course there's a huge backlash when you finally let it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally. I love how you named like each of you taking care of yourself. That's the thing that, well, first of all, like human brains want to be comfortable. Like our brains will go to all links to stay comfortable, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that is kind of one of the traps. I don't know if the trap's the right word, but like definitely habits of monogamy that we get sucked into. Like I've had so many people say to me,
Mhm.
I don't know how you do it. I like it takes so much energy just having one partner. And I'm like, well,
Right.
the way I'm able to do that is I trust my partners to manage their own emotions and I don't do it for them. That takes
Yeah.
so much energy and effort off of my plate. If I can
Yeah.
just let them handle their emotions and communicate with me instead of trying to like fix things and hold it all for them and take the responsibility for it, that's a lot of effort.
Mhm.
Totally. It's exhausting. And like, I think a lot of especially women, but I think both partners in monogamous relationships are doing that unconsciously, and they have no idea how much they're doing it and how much it's impacting their energy. I think people are doing it constantly.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think also like I'm I wouldn't recommend non-monogamy to anyone. Like
No.
I think like this is something that like comes to you, and I think if your relationship is still feeling like work and exhausting, I think then like stay with it and like see what work needs to be done, because my relationship doesn't feel exhausting. Like to me, Sasha feels like a teammate. Like it's actually energy generative, my relationship, more than anything else in my life. Um and I think if that's not being done, and if a person is still hooked in this, like I'm looking for comfort and I'm looking for like security, I think this is really where non-monogamy gets a bad rap, because you do fall into the trap of um, yeah, where you, like, unconsciously you're looking for like a comfort thing from the pain in your own relationship, and that's really where I'd say like keep your hands off from that kind of stuff. Sorry, you have a truck go by
Is
right
it really loud for you?
I didn't hear
Okay,
it.
great.
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I wouldn't. I think it's important that if you go and have other partners, that one is really, really has access to a level of honesty, not just with your partner, but also a level of honesty with myself. And I caught myself many times where I'm like, oh, I'm doing this for a motive that I wasn't aware of. And that's, I think, incredibly important, because otherwise, yeah, it's like you play with fire otherwise, I would say.
Yeah. Totally. I agree.
It's
You
a high
it's
level
a what?
practice.
High level practice. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
high
yeah, yeah.
level practice, polyamory or non-monogamy.
It definitely is. Yeah. It's something that yeah, you have to have a lot of self-awareness. You have to have a lot of courage and be willing to go places that you otherwise might not have to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like, I
Totally.
wouldn't do this to like spice things up, for example. Like, that wouldn't be a reason for me. Like, I'll be like, why is it not spicy where we are? Like, what's in the way? Which channel is blocked?
Mhm.
Because I think if
Yeah.
there's like, I'm not a spiritualist. I'm not very much like woo woo, but I do know what it feels like when things are on. And you could call this an enlightenment moment, right? And like, I know what it feels like when our relationship is enlightened, when it is turned on, when it is like electricity is flowing. And if that light switch isn't on, I rather look for the light switch than look for something that's spicing it up. And then when
Mhm.
it's on, when the relationship is actually on, and then you bring some other elements in, then it becomes fun. Then it becomes like something that like provokes growth
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
provokes a journey together.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. You've mentioned that you're very open about your relationship, and it's way outside of the box for a lot of people. How do you two navigate the uh, like social expectations around monogamy versus non-monogamy, and live your authentic truth in the face of society?
It's not really coming up for me, to be honest, because we are not living with other partners together.
Hmm.
And so I think when we got together, Sasha had another partner that was very present, and that brought up the topic of like, okay, like parents and such would like know about it, and you would have these like awkward conversations. And these days, I think I've like gone through so much of that, like having.
We confronted the question of like, it was another male partner who was my lover and partner and not Moritz's lover and partner, but sort of, whatever shape that is. I don't, there's a
I
name
think
for
it's
it, but
V.
yeah, we didn't use any specific name. It was just, I had two partners and we were talking about creating a life together. And um, the question came up of like, Moritz is not American, and this other partner asked me to marry him early on, and like going into that story, I think right now doesn't. But I think that was the moment in our
Yeah.
relationship where we were really confronting it, because Moritz had to ask the question, like, what's happening for me here if Sasha's going to be married to someone else? What is it?
But
What does it look like?
that's more of an internal. That's more again of an internal thing. But
But that came from a social structure.
yeah, that came from a social
You can only
structure.
marry one person.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is, back then I really like try to make myself understood. Like, I like try to like, and I would like be prone to argue with people, especially those who would be like not in monogamy, because I think you are looking for that friction to like work something out inside of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
and and so it's often ends up like you arguing with your mother or with your siblings because they don't get it, and all that kind of stuff. And these days I'm not looking for that external like affirmation confirmation anymore. And like most of the time, unless someone is asking me with and I can feel that they genuinely curious,
Yeah.
I don't talk about it. If someone comes and is curious, I'm like, you can penetrate me with your questions as long as you like. I love it. It's super fun for me to like talk about it, educate about it, like give insights. And I have that with some of my friends who are like really like absorb that stuff, don't want that for themselves, but they're curious and they're like, it's a nice conversation. But the moment someone is like, well, but that's like, the moment that tone shifts and it becomes an argument, I'm like, I'm out. I don't argue with people about this. It's like, no, thank you. It's too, and it's like robs my energy. I just don't do it. I'm like, I won't talk about it with you if you argument, because especially if they don't have an idea about it, they're just gonna come in and pour all of their judgments and their prejudices on you, and you're supposed to work that out for them. And I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I also like I'm very similar to Moritz in that I really like let the tone of where the other person's at lead on how much information I'm sharing. And like I noticed places in myself where there was a time where I was like, ooh, can I like say that I like had sex with another partner and put that publicly on my Facebook with like 2,000 friends and like family that wouldn't get it, but also like isn't really looking for it. So like extended family, like I've sort of like gotten over the fear. Like there was a time when I was like, if I say this and they have a judgment and I have to take care of their judgment, like that can be a place to dump a lot of energy, which I don't worry about anymore. And I also really like have become such a skillful feeler of why people are asking things that they're asking. 9 times out of 10, I can answer their question and skillfully come back with a curious on like what they actually are asking. Because usually, if they're like, oh, or you're in an open relationship and it's judgy, there's something that I want that they have. And it might not be that they also want open relationship, but there's a level of freedom or a level of permission that they have desire for. And they don't have approval in themselves to want that, and I
Mm-hmm.
can gently bring it down to a level that's actually inside their hearing and ask them a question that brings the conversation back into a range that's more appropriate for where they are in their own personal development. And
Yeah.
usually I'll get so much notice for my skillfulness in question asking and like honing in on a spot with that person that they sort of let go of their like fear or judgment or like, well, if I was that, I would be so, there's like, don't you get jealous is like the number one thing that
Uh-huh.
people who experience it themselves ask. It's like, don't you get jealous? And my answer to that question is, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
That's all there is to say. It's like,
Yep.
it's not really a conversation. Like, of course I get jealous. I'm human. Are you kidding? Like,
Right.
totally. And
Uh-huh.
I share with my husband about it. And like, it's such a turn on for us to talk about where I get turned on when he's with someone else. And that one version of that is jealousy, right? But like a lot of people who are asking this question aren't in the range of understanding how those two kinds of turn on could be connected in the umbrella of jealousy, right? Like that's more of a question for somebody who's also in this world, or really like personally called to be in this world. And I do know friends of mine who are really tend towards open relating, tend towards relationship that has like a form that's more malleable and more dynamic than like structured and still and stable and always the same. And they might be with a partner who's not doesn't tend towards that as much.
Mm.
And I think you have to really listen to yourself, because in partnership, it's very easy, if you're committed to someone over time, it's very easy to start becoming like that person. And something that I said to Moritz early on in our relationship was like, I really love you. And I really know that who I am is, I'm always going to be interested in like knowing myself in a lot of locations and having deep intimacy with other people. And I want commitment and I want to build a life together. And I'm very much a yes to that. And in addition, I know myself, and I've been in an experience before where I tried to make a decision between two people, and that was like so wrong for me to try to do that. So I
Mm-hmm.
knew going into our marriage and our relationship, like this is who I am. And he was also coming from an experience of being in open relationship and knowing the value of that. So that was like something that we talked about early on. But I do think, I agree with him. He said like non-monogamy is not for everyone. And I think that's really true. And I do think that there are people who feel it in themselves and really know. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking about it and you're feeling some of what we're saying in yourself, like you can really trust your own inner knowing. And I think it's very easy to like feel like we need to go with the crowd. And so if you have an inner knowing that says, I'm really curious about this, I really want this, I really want to know myself in these different locations, to trust that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I love that so much. Oh, that's so good. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would want to share with the listeners?
I thought of a little moment that I want to describe and talk about. Um, that for us, our experience of intimacy in sex is also a practice.
Yeah.
It's a place where we have a lot of alchemy, and this could exist inside monogamy. I think this could exist in any relationship, but we really view our experience of sexual endeavors and sexual um, play and connection as a place to look at, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. So what happens in sex, what comes up in sex, what's brought up as a result of his desire, my desire, desires that are co-arising, desires that he has that he thinks I want nothing to do with, desires that I have that I don't know how to share, like all of those things are an opportunity for alchemy. And we had an experience recently where we were like literally in the middle of making love, making out, like we were completely in a scene with each other, and there was a energetic place in me that wouldn't keep opening, and I was going to try to ignore it, and he felt it, and he like stopped what we were doing and just like paused moving his body and said like, I feel this place where there's something in you that isn't all the way open, can we look at that together right now? And did it in such a gentle and loving and curious way, right, without attachment to like how it opened. And I was like, I don't know if I know how to open it. And being able to share that in an experience like came from years of building up enough trust to be able to say that and not be like, no, like let's keep going, it's fine, like I don't need anything. There was a 5 or 10 years ago version of me that would have been like, it's fine, it's good enough, I don't need to open that closed door you
Mm-hmm.
know and he knew it needed to open before I knew it needed to open. And I trust him, and I trust his sight, and I trust his feeling in his body, and so like we kind of work together to like talk about it, open it, and draw out something that I had been angry about and scared about, that was from another interaction that we had had a few days before, and I had just been holding it in for a couple of days. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not how I want to play, but it's just what happened. And so we had this experience of being able to open something because of what we felt during sex, during intercourse, right? That I don't think would have gotten to in the same way if we were like, let's sit on the couch and talk about it, even though that's a tool that we totally love and use. And so you drew me out to say the truth and to say it directly. And he like kept asking me to get more honest until like he was crying, I was crying, like we both kind of had this opening from me being willing to say like, there was this moment where you hurt me and this thing that you did was painful, and here's the impact of it. And he wanted to feel it, and he wanted to know that. And I, even though I have all of this experience and knowing like I don't want to withhold from him and I don't want to take care of his feelings and like not deliver something because of my fear of his reaction, I was still holding on to it, and it was actually blocking the intimacy
Mm-hmm.
literally. And so
Yeah.
I think that's just such a powerful tool that we have gotten access to, that we support other couples in gaining access to learning how to use your sex as a practice and learning how to use desire as a tool in your practice. And it's not an easy thing to just go read a book and learn about, you know, like you have to really get experiential with this stuff. And like I think it's such a gift to have a partner that wants that, and to have a partner who's willing to stop us in the middle of sex and say something isn't open, and we actually like both desperately want to open it.
Well, I think I want to add one thing
Please,
here,
yeah.
and that's like, I think a lot of men actually, like, the reason why I do this is because it actually gets me to the thing that I want. And most men, the thing that most men want, okay? And but the problem is that the men in this society are conditioned to constantly fix and rescue. And the reason why and that, like, I just recently had a coaching session with someone where we went into this really deeply, and it was like, yeah, like, how is your relationship? It's okay. Like, all right, what does that mean? Like, how is your interactions, how is your connection going? Well, like, right now we mostly like have logistical conversations, okay? Like, it's about problem solving and all that kind of stuff. And the session went along, and basically what we unearthed was, I am fixing her because most men are afraid that, like, if a woman has a bad mood or she's unhappy, she won't open and be turned on for sex. And most men, if I ask them, what do you want? What kind of sex do you want? I'm like, well, I like this kind of stuff and that, like, whatever it is, whether it's butt stuff or BDSM or whatever the fantasies are that they would like to try out, right? And I asked them, like, why are you not doing it? And it's like, well, my wife doesn't like it. Oh, and then why don't you, like, bring it to her? Well, then she's not turned on about it. And this is like literally like what I describe sometimes is like, men only want to do it with the expectations that the woman is gonna, like, fall around their neck for it, like with like some big anime eyes, being like,
Uh-huh.
yay, about it. And when men don't get that, they retract what they actually want.
Mm.
They retract it, and they're like, well, she doesn't like that anyway, so, like, then they kind of like settle for a different reality where they accept the crumbs that a woman throws off. And they
Mhm.
only get the crumbs when they think that the woman is happy and turned on. So the solution to most men is like, well, in order to make her happy and turned on, I have to fix all of her stupid problems, and I have to,
Uh-huh.
like, get the money. I have to, like, hear every complaint and take it personal and take it as if it's my problem, which then, like, leads to all these ego issues that men have, right? Because they, like, take everything personal, and it leads to this, like, problem solver, fixer, knight in shiny armor kind of relationship. And it leads nowhere. The only place where that leads is an endless discussion about which problem is going to get fixed next in the relationship and where stuff is not good enough yet. And they never get to the cheese. They never actually create the
Mm.
moments where, because it's like, and then the result of it was, and I talked to that particular man, I'm like, because in the beginning of the session I was like, yeah, she wants to have more phone calls with me. And I'm like, are you having those? No, I'm too busy. And I asked him, would you be too busy if she was gonna would lay naked in front of you on the bed and be like, come on? He like, uh, fuck, you got me. No, I wouldn't be too busy for that. And that's the thing. It's like men become too busy and too involved in their purpose, right? But it's not really their purpose. It's just their stupid jobs, because it's actually more comfortable to be busy all the time than to be dealing with their partners, because they're tired of fixing this stuff for their partners.
Mhm.
They're not actually getting what they're looking for in their relationship, and it's tiring, it's exhausting. And this is the thing. It's like what we are trying to get to is not how do you focus on your woman and make her happy. It's how do you become a man that is so, I mean, I'm talking real purpose. I'm talking like you are sitting right in your passion. You want to get up at 7 a.m. in the morning because you're on fire. You like have a mission and you are like that. What happens is she cannot stay in her grumpy, complainy, turned off mentality because eventually she's gonna be like, what am I doing here? This man is hella turned on. He knows what he wants in life. She knows that there is no space for her to stay in that place. And what happens then is a woman starts questioning, and a woman starts to be like, I gotta turn on. I gotta like do. I gotta take out whatever. I gotta do whatever it takes in order to actually rise to meet him. And most relationships that I come across, it's it's the other way around. The woman is somewhat mostly turned on here and there in a patchy way, and he's kind of like slugging after it because he's tired and exhausted because he's not fed by the crumbs that fall off of her.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
really like, how does he get turned on? Because then she's gonna rise up to it, and she's not gonna continue emasculating him because then both people start rising.
Yeah, and I think what's possible is that like we both take a certain level of responsibility. You heard us talk about it over this hour, like the ways that we do it, and then like he rises and I rise, and the rise inspires the other partner to rise rather than like all this energy on like fixing or resenting or
Pleasing.
or acquiescing. Like all of those things don't create me being the best woman I can be and him being the best man he can be, but instead do the opposite, right? And so
Right.
really like lifting myself and taking the focus off criticizing and controlling, and him being in his truth and his like most joyful space and inviting me to rise to meet him there, and like not like I'm going whether you come or not, but like I'm going and you're invited,
Right.
like the ride is here and we can do it together.
And my ride is a good ride, like I love my ride. Like I can go on my ride without her. If she's not rising to meet it, I'm like, okay, good. Like have your moment, do whatever you need. Like I'm gonna do my thing because I love doing my thing. That there's When you're in that space, you don't have time to complain that your woman doesn't want to fuck you.
Yes, 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 yes. The thing that comes to mind when you're talking about that is what I see so often of, um, I want him to show up in this way, or I want him to do this thing. And then when he does, well, it wasn't fast enough. It wasn't soon enough. It didn't come in the right packaging. So I'm not going to accept it. And then like just more and more friction shows up, more and more friction, and nobody's happy.
That's the spot that I'm in. That's the spot of the anime eyes. Like a
Yeah.
man puts out an idea and he wants her to like get so excited immediately. And if it's not the case, I don't know what that exactly is, but there is some kind of like fear in most men that what we desire, if it's not meant with enthusiasm, then we don't want it. Like it's somewhat like if I would ask her for a blowjob and she's like, she didn't like, that's like when I talk about that with men, they're like, I would never ask. I want her to offer it, right? Like with again, like this, like the woman has to excitedly offer it. I'm like, why don't you just ask? Well, because I wouldn't stay hard. And that's the thing. Like the
I
man
want
is
you to
not
want to
in
do the
touch.
dishes.
Right. The man isn't actually in touch with his own body's turn on
Mm-hmm.
because his body's turn on has become dependent on her turn on.
Yeah.
So it's like her excitement has to be out, which is, if you look at porn, right, then like all the women are making the exciting sounds, which are really not happening in the reality of the bedroom.
Uh-huh.
Or they're happening in their lives.
And then it leads the man to like make some funky performance to
Yeah.
make her sound a certain way, but really you don't need any of that stuff because for me, like, maybe this is getting too x-rated, but like I can get hard on commando because I know my body. I know what
Sure.
to do with my body in order to be turned on. I know what to do with my mind. in order to be turned on. So she gets to be who she is without having to like be constantly in this performance game
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah.
And it's so hot that I get
Yeah.
to be who I am. And it turns me on so much that I can be myself. And that I don't, I get to ask for what I want and I get to receive it and I get to show up. And like when I'm sucking cock, I'm doing it for my own pleasure. I'm doing it in a way that feels good in my body, which like if you ever had the opposite, like you'll never want it again after you start to learn that you can do this for your own pleasure, And like, I mean, the men, if you've never received from a woman who is sucking cock for her own pleasure, I have no idea if we can say that in this podcast. You might
Totally
have to
can.
bleep me out or something. But okay, great, wonderful, cock. It's so different. Women are doing it in a way that feels good in her body, right? Like it's just such a different thing, and you can feel the difference, right? I mean, the same for oral sex, receiving oral sex, right? That like if he's doing it in a way that feels good to him, it is different.
Oh, it is.
And
it's also different. It's also feels, that's the thing, men do know, like they have a compass for when a woman is turned on, and there is some truth that like it feels better when she's actually turned on, but it doesn't come through all the ways that men are trying to create that, force that, but it comes through being independent as a couple, being independently motivated and ignited
and connected to our own pleasure separately and together.
Exactly. That's the gold right there. Totally. Okay, I have 2 more questions for you. One is, if people want to follow you or work with you, how do they find you?
Yeah, so we are awakened_intimacy on both Instagram and TikTok. And we have a Facebook community that's free and open to the public called the Awakened Intimacy Community.
And then we are offering right now, we are ramping up for another workshop. It's a 30-day for $30 like mini workshop that's gonna be taught live, and it's basically it's your first taste if you desire to be part of our community, where there's actually ongoing coaching and calls at a really affordable rate. Where you can learn with us like for a long period of time, as long as you want, and to immerse in our stuff. And in order to sign up for that $30 workshop, you have to go to our website, kirkmanhoodcoaching.com.
Beautiful. Okay, second question. It does not go on the main podcast. It's for the supporters of the show, patreon.com/non-monogamous. And it's called Just the Tip. And it's can you give us a favorite or best sex tip? You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. This was so beautiful.
That was Sasha and Moritz sharing their tip for the Just the Tip. And if you missed it, go become one of my lovers or friends with benefits at patreon.com/non-monogamous. By becoming one of our Patreon supporters, you're going to get access to behind the scenes bonus content that I keep aside for our community. Plus, you'll earn my personal gratitude, just like Ivy did, by becoming one of my friends with benefits. Thanks for listening today. I adore you. Bye.